Welcome back. Last time we completed our overview of the dimension of Islam, and now we want to return to the dimension of Iman in more detail. As you recall from the Hadith of Gabriel, the objects of faith are God, His angels, His prophets, His books, and the Day of Judgment. The reading and vision of Islam does such an excellent job discussing them that I'll just briefly summarize key elements and add commentary in this presentation. Let's consider faith in God. What is the Islamic doctrine of God? In the Islamic view of the divinity, first of all, there's the transcendence of God. God is a purely objective reality, not a concept in our minds. The knowledge of God comes from Him and must not be confused with Him. God is above all conceptualization and illusions. And yet the divinity is also immanent. The Quran says we are closer to man than his jugular vein. A poem by a Persian mystic says, "My friend, God, is closer to me than myself. How strange it is that I feel so distant from Him." The ideas that God is infinitely close to us and at the same time infinitely far away are the two poles for the understanding of the doctrine of God in the Quran. The Quran is replete with the intertwining of these two concepts. In the vision of Islam, Murata and Chittick illustrate these beautifully, with transcendence symbolized by concentric circles and immanence symbolized by radii connecting the center of the circle to the perimeter. The combination of both symbolizes immanence and transcendence. So the Muslim moves within a world in which the will of God is ubiquitous and His knowledge is everywhere. Faith is the manner of our participation in our relationship with God. It may be helpful to contrast the Islamic view of the divinity with other doctrines such as deism and pantheism. The Islamic and other traditional views of the divinity assert both God's transcendence and immanence, which are illustrated in the upper left corner of the table. Pantheism asserts immanence without transcendence, illustrated in the upper right corner of the table, making the world and everything in it God's. This is obviously inconsistent with Tawheed because it associates partners with God by making the relative absolute, a grave sin from the Islamic point of view. Deism takes the opposite position, asserting God's transcendence while denying His immanence, illustrated in the lower left corner of the table. Deism invokes the notion of God as a clockmaker who creates the world and then walks away from it. There's no revelation, and the world tells us nothing about God. Finally, there's atheism, which denies both God's transcendence and immanence, as illustrated in the lower right corner of the table. Agnosticism is the doctrine that nobody can know which of these alternatives is correct. We'll return to this discussion when we come to Islamic philosophy. But suffice it to say here that it's impossible to prove the non-existence of God. And it's illogical to claim that because I don't know which position is correct, nobody can know. That is really a form of pride from the Islamic perspective. The second element of Iman is faith in the angels. In the Islamic universe, the cosmos is full of angels, but in the West, the poor angels were expelled from Western religious consciousness after the 17th century. They only remain in a few places, such as Handel's Messiah or works of Johann Sebastian Bach and medieval cathedrals. Very recently in the West, however, books about angels are suddenly bestsellers. And that's because they represent a deep nostalgia in people for the angelic presence. In the West, the angels were banished as a direct consequence of the materialization of the cosmos by modern science. In this materialistic view of God's creation, angels play no role. Belief in them could be found among, say, a few pious old women in Italy or Ireland, for example. How many angels can dance on the tip of a pin is supposed to indicate an irrelevant question. The tip of the pin is the point, that which defines space. What could possibly be the relation between angels and the spatial world? This way of mocking medieval people is based on our ignorance of what is involved. In the Islamic universe, the angels didn't get shut out because the Quran is full of references to angels as well as the jinn, the psychic forces who are below the angels. The angels have many functions in the Islamic universe. According to the traditional Islamic understanding, everything in the cosmos that moves, the rains, the tides, the stars, earthquakes, clouds, moves through angelic presences governed by God. And then angels have functions which relate to us human beings. First of all is revelation. Jibril or Gabriel is the angel of revelation. Azrael is the angel of death. Muslims believe that no one dies except in the presence of the angel of death. The idea that the angel of death takes you at the time and place God has appointed also fascinated many Westerners who first encountered Islam. The famous British writer Somerset Maugham wrote of this in his Appointment in Samara. This short story, which was also made into a film, is based on the following famous story throughout the Islamic world. A man had a dream that he was going to die. So he prayed to God that he be taken to Samarkand, far, far away, so the angel of death would not meet him. So God accepted his wish, and the wind came and blew him and took him to Samarkand. As soon as he landed there, the angel of death appeared before him. And the angel of death said, "I'm very surprised, because this morning God told me to come and take your soul in Samarkand." And I said, "But this man is located in Balkh." God said, "You go to Samarkand, you'll meet him there." And so there he took his life. This is a very, very profound story when you think about it. We have an appointed time for death, and death is a supernatural, not simply natural event. Similarly, the angels Nakir and Munkar appear to the soul after death and question the soul about its state. The teachings of various religions concerning the posthumous states tell us that we're always judged at the moment of death according to who we are and what we've done in this world. According to Islamic teachings, as soon as a person dies, the two angels appear and ask, "Who is thy Lord?" and question whether one has faith in God or not, and then ask about various acts that one has performed. The answers determine the path that one follows in the posthumous state. The readings discuss the nature of the angels in greater detail, so I won't go into them here. Next time, we'll discuss the remaining articles of faith, namely God's books, His prophets, and the Day of Judgment.